What's up guys, it's NTR here. Ever since Dragon Ball brought itself back onto the mainstream scene with the Battle of Gods movie in 2013, the power of the series has been a massive topic of debate up until now, with the manga for Dragon Ball Super reaching its 95th chapter, and of course the Dragon Ball Super anime having released its second movie. Focusing primarily on Dragon Ball Super, this video acts as a sort of gathering ground for all the pieces of evidence and information we have on the series at this point in time, and using that information to come to a conclusion or form an interpretation of just how powerful the series is as of right now. Not only will we cover characters like Goku and the rest of the main cast, but also characters like Zeno, Grand Priest, and etc., both the manga and anime. Now without any further ado, let's get straight into it.
I will not let you destroy my world!
It may come as a surprise to absolutely no one that the first major thing that we will be talking about within this video would of course be the legendary battle between Goku and Beerus in Battle of Gods. Within that fight, Goku and Beerus' clashes alone were threatening to destroy the entire universe, which we know by that point in the story is in reference to the macrocosm due to context. The waves themselves were even shown surpassing the very macrocosm going outside of it. Not only would this imply that their clashes were threatening to destroy Otherworld, which is stated to transcend dimensions within the Daizenshu 4, but it's even stated within the Chozenshu 4 that the power of a god of destruction is also that transcends dimensions. Now, some people try to counter this statement by arguing that the statement is only in reference to Beerus from the Battle of Gods movie, and therefore wouldn't apply to the manga or anime. However, this is not the case. For one, the statement is not specific towards Beerus alone, rather it's for gods of destruction in general, as it says, for he is known as the god of destruction, or as he is praised as the god of destruction. In fact, even ignoring that portion of the statement is directly in reference to the relationship between the Kais and the gods of destruction, not specifically towards Beerus as a character. Hence why they show the hierarchy between the gods of the universe on this page. Another issue with this is that even if it was stated to be about Beerus as a character, the Battle of Gods movie was actually canon towards the manga and anime. So just because the events of that saga were represented to us in the anime and manga once again, it doesn't immediately retcon every single piece of information provided to us about the events in the saga and the characters within the saga, unless of course they are directly noted to no longer be the case or to be completely retconned. In fact, not only is the information provided to us by specifically the Chozenshu worldview, which is noted to be giving us information about the Dragon Ball world rather than about any specific continuity, but absolutely none of the information provided within the worldview about the Battle of Gods events or saga or characters are ever retconned when they are presented again in the anime or manga. Rather, all the Chozenshu's lore and the events are kept the same. So there's really nothing bringing the validity of this statement into question. Now, the first main issue people have with the Otherworld statement is the idea that apparently the term used for transcend can be translated as transcendental, which implies more so being spiritual rather than being above or beyond something in terms of its limits. The term used specifically for the word transcend in the translation is the term chozetsu shita, which just means to transcend or transcendence. Also, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, the translation of this dimensionally transcendental statement comes from doesn't even make any sense. It at one point even calls Otherworld a country. Now, another counter being used is that when it says transcends dimensions, it's saying dimensions in terms of realms or universes, saying it's above realms, and that it's simply saying it's above these realms that can't be seen when you look up from the living world. The problem with this is that there are no realms between Otherworld or the living world to begin with. I could kind of understand this interpretation if there were some realms between the two of them that would imply that, Otherworld is simply above these realms that are above the living world, therefore that's why the living world can't perceive them. However, every other part of the macrocosm's cosmology is either a part of the Otherworld or a part of the universe. The closest thing that we have to this is not even a dimension, rather it's a place called Osoroshi Forest that's completely exclusive to Dragon Ball Super's anime and does not exist within the manga continuity, as the forest is never noted to exist within any guidebooks or material that is canon to both of them. Rather, it's only exclusively told in the anime of Dragon Ball Super. Also, we know for a fact that Otherworld isn't literally above the main universe. It's actually more so implied to be next to it or adjacent to it. This is sort of implied any time characters are moving between the two realms. The macrocosm map is not to scale, and it's just a representation of the hierarchy of certain things. And while I am aware that some translations of the transcend dimension statement do say that they look down upon the mortal realm, however, the term used for look down upon isn't actually looking down at, it's more so looking down upon as in overlooking or overseeing something, taking command of something, not literally looking down at. So there's really nothing pointing to the term dimensions within this statement being in reference to realms rather than actual dimensions. Or at the very least, there's no good arguments that I've encountered that point against the fact. Now, just how impressive is transcending dimensions in context to Dragon Ball? Well, at the time of the release of these statements, the highest known limit of dimensions within the series would be the different dimensional space embedded within the Grand Kai's mansion. Now, of course, the term alone could imply lower dimensionality or higher dimensionality. However, not only do most dictionaries that I have found that reference the term seem to more so reference it going up in dimensionality, but we also have the fact that three-dimensional beings can fit within the space, implying that it should be different dimensional in a higher context rather than a lower context. Now with that in mind, this space should of course be 5D as it is different dimensional to everything we've seen before. So going beyond the known limits of dimensions within Dragon Ball should at least be 6-dimensional. And it's actually surprisingly consistent for Dragon Ball characters to reach this tier of power within the Battle of Gods saga. As one, that's the first saga we actually see characters being capable of affecting Otherworld, at least within both canons. But the power of Beerus and the power of Super Saiyan God are contextually and constantly implied to be of a transcendent level or beyond anything that could possibly be imaginable. In fact, even VGem states that the Battle of Gods fight was a super dimensional battle. So there is a clear narrative cutoff for everything previous in the scaling chain, so a massive jump in power to this degree is completely justified. Now moving on from Battle of Gods, the characters of Dragon Ball Super continue to surpass their previous power by leagues and bounds, completely eclipsing what they could do previously. Within the Goku Black arc for both the anime and manga, we see Vegito appear within the story, the power of Vegito of course being the multiplication of Vegeta's power by Goku's power. Not only do we see Vegeta and Goku tank hits even in base that were meant for a blue Vegito after they defuse, but we even see Goku then compete with an even stronger Zamasu within the manga, as of course he'd be getting stronger from the Zenkais and natural Saiyan strength boost from this healing factor, doing so much damage to his body that not only was he struggling to regenerate, but he was even leaking out ki, implying he was doing damage similar to, if not above, that of Vegito previously. Zamasu within the manga even has a statement of being capable of destroying an entire timeline. These timelines will contain all 12 macrocosms across all of, well, time, for as long as they've existed. Now, however much bigger a timeline being capable of containing smaller timelines should be in comparison to the space-times it contains is pretty debatable. I don't really know too much about the topic myself. Some could argue thousands of times bigger, some might argue infinitely bigger. I don't know, I'm not going to get into specifics about that. But regardless, it's safe to say that it is quite an impressive statement. In the anime, after Zamasu dies, his very ideals fuse with the universe, and he's even seen being able to purge through to other timelines as he grows. Goku, who we know should be able to sense Zamasu's ki by this point, actually implies that if he had a Zenzu bean, he'd be able to do something about Zamasu. Pretty crazy when you think about it. These characters then take the power that they gain from this adventure into the Tournament of Power. However, we're going to shift focus from the main cast for a second, as I promised I would at the start of the video, and then start talking about the higher tier characters such as Zeno and the Grand Priest. From the moment he appeared, Zeno had Beerus and Champa absolutely shitting themselves. And I mean shitting themselves. The same Beerus and Champa who together could easily wipe out both the Universe 7 and Universe 6 macrocosms were bowing down to this childlike figure right in front of them, which already establishes him as a great threat. We then later get confirmation from both the anime and manga that Zeno could erase or destroy literally everything and anything in an instant, if he so pleased. For the anime, this statement is absolutely insane as it would include even the world of Void, which is stated within the Dragon Ball Super Encyclopedia for the Tournament of Power to be a void lacking the very concepts of space and time. This is likely why the Grand Priest describes it as an infinite void, as since it isn't bound by concepts like space, it has no physical limitations in that way. A realm of such magnitude would be described by most power scalers as being outer-versal. Now, of course, people may question the validity of this statement due to the fact that we later do see that time seems to function during the Tournament of Power, both through the timer and Hit's time skip. However, this is completely fine as it can just be assumed that the Grand Priest added time and space to the realm, which isn't all that far-fetched as angels have already displayed previously the ability to manipulate time and space. And it's already been noted to us that he added an adjusted gravity, which implies adding and adjusting space and time, as those are concepts gravity relies on. In fact, that kind of is what gravity is. At its core, it is the bending of space and time. Of course, with that in mind, that would mean that any feats of characters affecting the realm past the start of the Tournament of Power would not be impressive. However, for Zeno, since this statement is made while Whis still addresses it as a space beyond space and time, then it would be impressive for him. The encyclopedia is specifically for the anime, so this wouldn't apply necessarily to the manga scaling. However, within the manga, we would still have the subspace. The subspace being described as a place lacking both the concepts of space and time, and is where things like the hyperbolic time chamber and the Sogoroku space are contained. Whis likely knows about the subspace, as it has been shown that his perception range does reach even into hyperbolic time chambers, which are contained within that space. If that is the case, then Zeno would scale to it as well. As for the Grand Prix specifically, Whis actually states verbatim that he is the strongest person he knows. Some people may question this because of course Zeno exists, but there's never actually been a statement in the manga of Zeno being the strongest character. There is of course a statement from Whis calling him the greatest, however within the Japanese that's more so in context to him being the most important thing in the universe. And nothing is above him is actually translated as no one is higher than him. This means that at the very least within the Dragon Ball Super manga, the strongest character in the verse is the Grand Priest, placing him above Zeno, which would make him outerversal. The Tournament of Power forced some of the most powerful members of our main cast to break their limits in entirely new ways in order to adapt to the levels and strengths and abilities of the fighters from the different universes they would be facing. The most dangerous of all of these of course being Jiren the Grey himself. During the Tournament of Power, Jiren's power reached a level by which Vados herself, a being well versed in space-time manipulation, an angel, deemed his power to be that transcended time. This statement was later then backed up by Supreme Kai himself. A lot of people try to argue that the statement is only in reference to Hit's abilities specifically and nothing else related to time. However, I would argue that a character well versed in space-time manipulation and well educated on time-based things, as they would be as angels, and also as a father who's capable of literally creating time and space itself, would not make such a broad statement for such a hyper-specific claim. Obviously, there's always an argument to be had. However, if you go with the interpretation that she, as she says time itself, is referencing time itself, at the very least, it would mean that characters of Jiren's level and above should be above baseline level time-based abilities. I say baseline because of course some verses could have extreme variations of time or higher causalities or higher forms of time, etc. For example, Dragon Ball itself has not only space-times but even greater timelines that contain smaller space-times, with Whis even referencing a sort of time axis. One could argue that basic temporally bound attacks and abilities wouldn't even be able to reach Dragon Ball characters, as since their abilities operate on an irregular causality, such attacks wouldn't affect them. If you believe Vados is also including the timelines within her statement of it transcending time, which she should logically be doing so, then of course it acts as a very good supporting attack potency argument, as of course it would mean that Jiren's raw power transcends the timelines, which of course, we've already discussed how potentially impressive that is. Anyway, having completed the first phase of Dragon Ball Super, we will now be moving on to the Broly movie, which will be the last segment of the series we will be discussing in this video.
Go!
Right after the events of the Tournament of Power, Goku and Vegeta are faced with another powerful opponent known as Broly, a powerful Saiyan who was lost in a planet called Vampa for many years. With Broly being described as their strongest enemy yet, and Goku and Vegeta having become massively more powerful from the Tournament of Power and continuing to train afterwards, us as viewers were quite aware that an ultimate battle was simply inbound, a super-dimensional ultimate battle. This statement was first presented to us within the Broly movie anime comic for the Broly vs Gogeta portion of the battle, and then in later releases of the comic was just used as a description for the entire Broly encounter in general. We know the comic to be canon as it was placed in the official Shueisha timeline for the manga events. Some people try to argue that since we got a short recap of what took place when Broly appeared within the manga, that short recap absolutely makes the canon version of the movie for the manga non-canon. For reference, the recap was about 4 pages. Rather than give a direct response to this stupid argument, I'm gonna ask you a simple question. Does the short 2-page Buu Saga recap we got at the beginning of Dragon Ball Super, which presents events and certain aspects slightly differently than in the Buu Saga originally, make the entirety of the Buu Saga from Dragon Ball Z non-canon? Now for those who have a brain who are still with us, let's discuss the implications of this superdimensional statement. The term superdimensional is a term that is used to imply that something is transdimensional, or in other words, transcends dimensions. Now a lot of people try to argue that since there is a scene of Broly and Gogeta breaking into some random unknown realm, that the superdimensional statement is just referencing that they crossed to another dimension or went beyond the dimension that they were inside. I've talked to many Japanese speakers, and even my friend Zero2, who has a PhD in Japanese translation, seem to all say that the term is used dominantly for being higher dimensional or being beyond dimensions, rather than for defining dimensions as just being realms. Which for reference isn't even an actual definition of the term dimension, it's just a way that some fictions tend to use the word quite a bit. This actually makes a lot of sense to me, as the term transcend in Japanese can be written in many different ways that imply different things. Some variations of the term transcend can be in reference to crossing between or moving beyond something. The kanji for super, otherwise known as cho, usually tends to be paired up with other kanji when it's in use for being moving across or moving beyond. However, within the term superdimensional, it's not paired with any of the necessary kanji to convey that meaning. I think I've done enough to present why I really don't believe it would be about crossing or moving beyond in context, but if people still want to believe that is the case and still want to interpret it that way for whatever reason, that's completely fine. I'm not going to force you to interpret anything one way or another way. However, going along with what I presented in this video, we can take the statement in two ways for this fight. Either one, it's just a supporting statement for Dragon Ball characters already being of this level, as they already are 6-dimensional at least, based on my arguments. Or one could argue that this statement would be in direct comparison to previous battles before this, and would mean that the characters of the Broly movie are actually dimensionally above what they were previously. Now the latter is definitely debatable, however I think it's decently supported by one, the fact that Goku and Vegeta just came out of one of the most eventful battles of their lives, being the Tournament of Power, where they were forced to break their limits over and over again to overcome the walls that were in front of them, acquiring new forms and new abilities. And that Broly and Gogeta breaking into this new realm that we don't even have a name for was simply a way to narratively convey that they've broken into this whole new level. As a little bit of a fun fact, the Dragon Ball website actually describes the CGI that was used for the movie as super dimensional imaging. Pretty interesting. This makes sense within the cultural context for describing the transition between 2D animation to 3D animation for an anime. Now taking a look at the Broly movie novelization, there actually is a very interesting description of the fight between Broly and Gogeta once they break into that unknown dimension. Within this portion, it's stated that Broly and Gogeta broke the barriers between dimensions. Now the argument I'm about to make here is extremely interpretive, so take it with a grain of salt, but I just thought it's worth mentioning here, because there's many ways to look at this feat. I don't even necessarily fully agree with it myself, I just think it's a way you can look at it. If you believe this statement is implying that what Broly and Gogeta were fighting in would be what is between the boundaries between dimensions, then the only other realm with a description of this nature would be the subspace. The boundaries between dimensions being broken, leading Gogeta and Broly to this unknown realm between dimensions. Kinda sounds like the subspace, at least from this perspective. If you agree with this being the case, then when Broly and Gogeta broke out of the realm and entered the main world again, that would be an arguably out-of-reversal feat, as of course it would be a feat of them affecting this realm beyond the concepts of space and time. Again, this is extremely interpretive and honestly is probably one of the higher interpretations you could take from this statement. And how this would even apply to the anime and manga is already debatable, as people debate upon what the novelization is even supposed to be. Some people take it to just be extrapolating on the events that took place, others take it to just be its own canon. However you choose to look at it, this is just one way of looking at the feat, and there are many ways to do so most likely, but I just thought it'd be interesting to present this. And now we finally made it to the end of this incredibly long video, oh my lord. If you felt some descriptions and explanations were very shorthand or missing a lot of stuff, it's because I was really trying to make this video as short as it possibly could, as I knew it was going to turn out to be very long in the end. I already planned to put within the pinned comments an extrapolation on a lot of stuff I didn't extrapolate on within the video itself. But if there's stuff you want me to dig deeper into or just questions you have in general, I probably won't see most of the comments of this video depending on how well it does. So that's what my Cash App would be for. I'll likely end up making a bunch of short videos on the TikTok responding to all these queries and questions, or I'll just make one big YouTube video which goes over all the questions and queries I'm given, at least most of them, probably prioritizing the biggest donations that cover a good chunk of what you guys will be asking anyway. Plus, such donations would just be generally appreciated anyway, you know, it'd be nice. Absolutely no obligation, of course, but, you know, the option is there. Anyway, that'll be it from me. My Discord, Cash App, and TikTok are all linked within the description of this video. Anyway, without any further ado, Antagonist out.